Hey everyone, I hope we're all doing okay. I'd like to welcome you to the start of what is almost certainly going to be a very long project. As you can see, we're going to be playing Might and Magic 6, The Mandate of Heaven, but this isn't going to be any regular playthrough. No, this is going to be a completionist run. My goal in this first video is to just explain what I mean when I say we're going to be doing a completionist run of this very old but excellent game. And just a fair warning, this first video is going to be entirely me just talking, so if you're not too interested in the big picture details about the scope and the parameters of the series, and you want to get straight into the action, then feel free to jump ahead to video number 3, which is when I will actually be creating our party and starting the game. And if you're new to the series, and you might want to attempt a run like this yourself, or even if you're not new, but you would like your memory refreshed, then I'd encourage you to watch the second video as well, which is where I will be trying to explain the notoriously confusing and complicated item generation and distribution mechanic in this game. So, for this video, I had 4 major objectives I wanted to talk about for this series, but before I even get to those, I want to talk a bit more generally about what it even means to play a game in a completionist 100% kind of style, and how that might be a bit different for this game, which is very, very old. You see, I feel like as modern gamers, as gamers in this era, I think we've gotten a little bit spoiled, you know, due to all the little features and conveniences and time savers that we've come to take for granted that are now the norm in the games we play. Like chief among which is, and it's something so embedded that we don't even think about it anymore, we don't have to work very hard these days to know how much of a game we've completed after we've started playing it. In fact, a lot of games, maybe not most, but a lot, will literally give you a percentage. It'll give you a number that it's calculated, which will tell you exactly how much of the game it thinks you've completed so far. It'll start at 0% with a fresh save file when you go in for the first time, but as you start doing things, main story missions, optional quests, you know, gathering the various collectibles, you'll see that percentage going up, and it'll go up and up and up until it eventually hits 100%. Now granted, that 100% won't always include everything. You know, there might be secrets, Easter eggs, things that are hidden, or there might be some DLC that got released years after all the other major content, and therefore wasn't covered by the completion tracking system that was with the game when it launched. But by and large, between things like that percentage and whatever extra little trackers you might have in other parts of the game, you will generally have a very good idea of how much you've done, how much there's left to do, and often you will get details as specific and granular as how many of each specific kind of collectible remain to be collected in each specific sub-zone of the game. And sometimes the game will even mark them on the map for you. So you get a lot of help in your quest to complete the game. That is not so much the case with this game. You see, this game came out in, I believe, 1998, or around then. To put it a different way, this game is from a time when people actually had to remember phone numbers and birthdays, right? Using their own memory. This game is from an era where if if you were new to a city, you had to physically read a map and then work out using your own sense of spatial reasoning how to get from one place to another, right? This game is from a time when Bill Clinton was still president of the United States. All of this is to say that this game is from an era in our history that predates a lot of the conveniences we've come to take for granted, not just as gamers, but as a world, as a species. Now, that's not to say this game isn't going to do anything to help us. It does have a very rudimentary quest log system, so if you get a quest, it goes in the quest log. If you complete the quest, it goes in a separate section, which I believe is in every character's individual character sheet. But that is essentially all that the game will do. It's not going to do anything fancy like track quest stages. So for example, if you're on a quest to find a specific item and then deliver that item to a certain person, and you've just found the item, the quest won't update. So the onus will be on you. The onus will be on you to, number one, remember that you're even on this quest, because although there is a quest log, it does get filled up and cluttered pretty quickly. Number two, to remember that you now have the item, which, if you haven't been organizing your inventory as you've been playing, can be a bit of a challenge. Thankfully, the inventory system here isn't as bad as something like Ultima 7, but still, it can get out of hand. And after remembering that you're on the quest and that you have the item, you then have to figure out how to get to the person you need to deliver it to, and there isn't going to be any quest marker telling you where to go. No, you're going to have to find it yourself in the game, or consult a walkthrough, either or. And there's also a journal system which tracks a few things, but it's very limited. All of this is to say the game isn't going to do a whole lot when it comes to letting you know what you've done and what remains to be done. And as we'll see, the fact that this game doesn't do the heavy lifting in terms of keeping a catalog of our progress is going to complicate some of the objectives I have for this series. That's going to make more sense as I actually start talking about those objectives. So, with that long preamble out of the way, let's get into it. Objective number one, a pretty obvious one that I've already alluded to, is we will, of course, be doing all the quests. And this, as should be obvious, will include all of the main quests that are required in order to eventually end the game. This will also include what are called promotion quests, which in this game are strictly speaking optional, but you'll want to do them generally even in non-completionist runs, because these quests are how your characters will attain the subsequent ranks in whatever class they started out as. And some skills before the trainers will train you to certain ranks of mastery, they will actually require that you've completed certain promotions. We'll talk more about that in the actual game. For now, what's important is the fact that we're going to be doing all the promotion quests. And the third category of quests, as you might expect, are the side quests. We'll be doing all of those as well. So that was objective number one, do every single quest. The second objective is, again, something that came up right at the end of that previous section there. It has to do with skills. And this is the first objective where I ran into my first challenge when thinking about how to structure this playthrough. You see, again, as modern gamers, I feel like we've gotten a bit too reliant on the developers in terms of we expect them to tell us what is or what isn't notable enough to actually strive to do in the games that they make. And these days, typically, it's done through achievements or other like in-game things that tell you you've done something notable. That's not really how games worked in 1998. Typically, they would just give you a bunch of things you could do, and it was left to you to decide what was or wasn't notable enough to be worth attempting. All of that is to say is that for this playthrough, I had to come up with my own approach for what a completionist take would be for the skills in this game. And I wanted to do it in a way that was thorough and satisfying, but at the same time not tedious or frustrating. And what I settled on in the end was that between the 4 members of my party, every possible skill would be represented at least once, meaning at least one member would have that skill. And that for every skill any party member learned, they would eventually take that skill to the highest rank of mastery in this game, which is the master rank. All of that is to say that by the end of the game, for every skill in this game, I would have at least one party member with a master rank in that skill. Now, you might ask why I didn't go further. For instance, if you took completionist logic to its extreme, you would say, well, every single character should learn every single skill that they're eligible to learn, and then take all of those skills to the highest rank of mastery. And you could do that. There's nothing stopping you. You could play that way. The problem with that is there are a number of skills in this game which, while they are useful, their usefulness does not increase from more than one party member having them. So, for example, to disarm traps, you really only need one party member that's good at disarming traps. To identify items, you really only need one party member that's capable of identifying items. A few other skills work this way, for example, repairing items and the merchant skill, meaning there aren't any spillover benefits from more than one party member having that skill. It's not like in certain other games where the person with the second highest skill might contribute a small bonus. No, it's very individualistic in the sense that it's about one party member at a time, and can that party member do this thing or not? So, your reply to that might be, well, what if you're in a dungeon and your party member that has all these utility skills that you want to use gets knocked out? Wouldn't it be helpful to have a second person who can do those things? And yeah, in that specific moment, there might be some small convenience value in having another party member with those utility skills. But the thing is, in this game, if you play well, it's easy to recover from minor setbacks, meaning it's easy to rest and heal up unconscious party members, and generally it's easy to undo the status effects that might incapacitate your characters. Excuse me. And while it can occasionally be a pain, some of those status effects, ultimately what you would gain in convenience from having more than one party member with these utility skills, you would lose far more in the skill points that the character would have to invest in order to make those skills work. And as you will come to learn, and as you might already know from playing this skill, this game rather, skill points are a very precious resource, and you would rather not waste them. In fact, you might come to feel actual physical pain if you're forced to spend skill points on something that isn't actually helping you. So for that reason, I will endeavor to only invest skill points into things that are helpful in some way and not redundant. Now, the one exception I'm going to make is the diplomacy skill. Diplomacy, which is entirely useless, but, you know, completionism essentially compels me to do this. You see, it would just not sit well with me if between the 4 members of my party they had every single skill except for one, right? It would just be too conspicuous in its absence. So for that reason, I will have one party member with the diplomacy skill, and I will even invest enough skill points to raise that skill to the highest level of mastery. But that's going to be the only instance of me throwing away skill points on something that's worthless. Okay, so that was objective number 2, skills. The third objective has to do with the various zones in this game, like the areas, the environments. Now, this game is divided into a number of large outdoor exterior zones. I believe there are 15 in total. And, they're pretty varied. They have different climates. Some of them will have the major cities, others will be more wilderness heavy. So a lot of different interesting locales to explore. And within these large exterior zones, there are, I guess you could call them dungeons or interior zones. That's a more general term. There will be these contained areas that you can go into, and usually they'll have monsters to fight. And most of these areas, and now I'm including both the interior and exterior zones, you will be required to go to as a result of either a main quest or a side quest or promotion quest. So like some quest will send you there, and that'll account for most of them. But there are a couple of interior zones that are purely optional in the sense that no quest will send us there, but they are on the map for you to go to if you want. And of course, because this is a completionist run, we'll be going to all of them. Now, I actually wanted to take this objective one step further. So, I didn't want to merely visit all of them for the sake of checking them off a list. I wanted to actually completely clear every single area, every single exterior zone, every single interior zone of all hostiles, of all enemies, at least once. Now, why do I use the odd phrasing at least once? Well, it's because in this game, areas do reset after a while. So each zone has its own hidden timer, and after a certain amount of in-game time has elapsed, the area will reset, meaning monsters in it will respawn, and the chests and other containers will repopulate with different items, different loot. And, this is kind of sad in a way, especially for the kind of completionists who like to kill things in games and have them permanently stay dead. And I count myself as one of those occasionally. Like the finality of it, the closure from having something stay permanently dead. You won't really get that in this game. Now, that's kind of balanced out by the fact that you can use the regenerating nature of monsters and loot to level up your party and find interesting items. But I mean, ultimately, it is what it is. You've got to accept the game on its own terms. Now, before I move on, there is one caveat to what I just said. I said I was gonna aim to clear each area at least once, but the thing is, and this is an example of the game's lack of keeping a catalog of our progress, coming back to complicate my objectives. This is an instance of that. The game isn't actually going to tell me when I'm in an area whether I've completely cleared it or not. I'm gonna have to make that determination myself. There are things in the game that'll help. For instance, there's the Wizard Eye spell, which it's an air magic spell that will mark creatures on the mini-map. Hostiles will be red, friendlies will be green. And there's also it's hard to describe without showing it to you in-game, but it's kind of like an awareness radar system where next to each character portrait there's a light, a symbol, and when you're far away from all enemies it's green. When enemies are kind of close but not that close, it's yellow, and when enemies are right next to you, you know, in striking range, then it's a red light. So between those two things, we'll get a pretty good sense when we're in an area of whether it's empty or whether there's somebody left. But just so you know, and this is just me being transparent, you know, just laying it all out, it is possible that I might be in an area, and this applies especially to the sprawling interior zones with lots of different rooms like Castle Darkmoor. It is possible that there might have been some enemy in some corner, and I just never got close enough to them to for the game to register their presence, and I mistakenly thought I'd cleared the area when I in fact hadn't. That possibility does exist. That said, I will be doing my best to try and clear each area at least once, and I'm confident that if I think an area is clear, that 99% chance it will in fact be clear. But just so you know, this objective might not be as foolproof as some of the others. It's a bit of a gray area. But let's leave it at that for now, that we'll try our best to clear each exterior zone and each interior zone at least once. Alright, moving on to objective number 4, and this objective is going to be by far the most difficult one out of this lot. In fact, honestly, it's stressing me out a little bit, even just talking about it. So the objective is going to be to try and get as many of the artifacts and relics as we're allowed to in this game. And you might notice I've phrased that in an awkward way. It's because of the way the game works. You see, well, actually, before I talk about that, I'll just say briefly what artifacts and relics are. They're essentially this game's counterpart to unique items in, you know, games like Diablo, Diablo 2, in the sense that there are different item types, you know, like swords, axes, chainmail armor, plate mail armor, helms, gloves, boots, etc. And each item type will have at least one variant with a special name that has very high stat bonuses and extra modifiers, extra enchantments on top of that. So in this game, these items are named mostly after either Greek gods or I believe they're figures from British folklore. And these items are your artifacts and relics. And the reason I said this is going to be a difficult objective is because Well, number one, there is a hard limit on how many of these you can find through random loot. It is 13. And number two, the way the game handles how items are generated into the world, how they're distributed within chests, and what happens when areas reset. These factors will combine to frustrate your attempt to find artifacts, and it's very easy to lose some and not be able to even reach the limit of 13. So the game already limits you, but due to the way the game was designed, it can be hard to even hit that limit. And I'll be talking in more detail about that in video number 2, which is on item generation and distribution in this game. But yeah, the goal is going to be to get the theoretical maximum number of artifacts and relics, which is 18. Worryingly, when I was on the forums, I could find only one person who even claimed to have hit this limit. So, you know, the signs aren't great at the outset, but you know what? I have confidence, right? I think we're gonna do it. You know, you might think I'm naive, but I also think I'm naive if I'm being honest. But you know what? Let's just see what happens. So anyway, that was objective number 3. Try to get as many of the artifacts and relics as we can. Moving on to objective number... sorry, that was objective number 4. Moving on to the 5th section. This is going to be more of a miscellaneous section for little things in the game that aren't technically quests, but you know, that because it was a completionist run, it wouldn't be right to neglect them. So for instance, there is an arena combat system in this game. In a certain city, you can challenge monsters that are kind of randomly generated, but based on your party's level, and if you win, you get a reward. It's a fun system. We'll be doing that a few times. It's something that you can do indefinitely, so it's not a quest that'll end, but it's something that we will be doing a few times. Other than that, there's also a bounty hunting system, so periodically the town halls in this game, you know, I guess the seats of municipal government, will designate a certain monster as the, you know, the bounty for the month, or whatever the period is, I don't remember exactly. And if you're able to kill that monster and return before the period ends, you get a reward, and it's a good way to raise your reputation as well. So we'll be doing some bounty hunting. There's also a pilgrimage system in this game, so there are a number of shrines scattered across the exterior outdoor zones. 12 shrines in total, one for each month. And if you go to the shrine at the correct time, based on the game's in-game calendar system, then you will be rewarded with permanent boosts to your party's stats. Which means it's good to do in addition to its completionism value. And again, this is something that you can do indefinitely, although the first time you do it, you get a big reward. Subsequent times, you'll only get a small reward. So again, this isn't a thing that'll end, but it's something that we will be doing every chance that we get. There's also an alchemy system in this game, and one of the goals is going to be to brew every kind of potion at least once. Although, for practical reasons, we're going to be leaning heavily towards the black potions that permanently raise your party members' stats, which is pretty handy. So that's going to take precedence in terms of where most of our alchemy ingredients go to for a long time, but eventually we will have made every type of potion at least once. And other little things that I haven't thought about will also go in this 5th miscellaneous section. And I think that's about it for now. So I'm gonna call this video good, and if you so choose, I will see you in the next video where I'll explain item generation and distribution. And if you're not too worried about that, then I will see you in the video after that, which is when I will be creating my party and starting the game. So I'll see you then. Take care.